Well, this is Brent. Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com, coming to you, coming at you from the remote hinterlands of the Wabash of the River Valley, where the hogs, the frogs, and the dogs keep up a racket all night long. We're going to talk about Arthur J. Stansbury's Catechism on the Constitution of the United States. And we're almost to the end. Oh, we're going slow, clause by clause and blow by blow. It's a catechism. Catechism is catty, means we used to talk about things being cattywampus. Catty means straight across from, in a way. It's a Greek preposition. Cattywampus means crooked a little bit. But catechism, watch me, please, watch me. Catechism is a compounded word that's catty. Catty, that's a preposition in the Greek tongue. And then, well, that means as far as or according to, that kind of, right down to, catty. And schism is the word, the Greek word from which we get our word echo. Echo. Catechism is an echo. It's a responsive exercise for students. You learn the questions and the answers, and then I quiz you by asking you the questions, and you give me the answers you learned. It's a response, like an echo. It's in the Bible. In the Old Testament, there's a Hebrew word that means catechism. And in the New Testament, there's a word that is pronounced catechism. And Stansbury has written a catechism on the Constitution of the United States, and we're going through that. Are you ready, Miss Francine? If a man is tried, according to our Constitution of the United States, if a man is tried and found not guilty, may he again be tried for the same offense. If a man is tried and found not guilty, may he again be tried for the same offense. Answer. Not only no, but H-E-double-L no. And I didn't say that word. Of course, the word hell is a word in the Bible. I use it for emphasis. No, it's called double jeopardy. To be tried twice for the same offense after you've been acquitted is a contrary to our common law tradition. Now, that's not contrary to the law of the city. They can do any blasted thing they want, they think. Oh, it's awful. Oh, I could apply this one. I've been tried for a crime, carried 5 years. All told, I was facing 9. They tried me, 6-week trial. I was over six hours under the hammer and the anvil of the engine of cross-examination. It was brutal. Brutal. Woo! And the jury acquitted me. They sprung me. They came back with a verdict of not guilty. Funny thing, during that whole ordeal, I was calm as a cucumber, cool as a cucumber. That wasn't me. It just after about 7 or 8 years of brutal attacks on me and my family and trying to take my children from me, arresting my wife and my daughter, throwing them in jail, trying to get at me. After all that, and then 6 weeks of trial, I was acclimated to the fight. You ever been in a fight? I mean, been in a fight. It's not something I've ever made a habit of, but I have been forced into a position where I fought. I have had that happen. It's not a desirable position to be in. Nobody ever completely wins, and usually come out of it with scars, or if not bodily scars, emotional scars. I've been in fights with animals. Oh, yeah. Bulls, steers, cows. and calves, all those. Hogs, dogs, roosters. That's fun, though. Bumblebees, boy, I've been in some serious fight with bumblebees, but that was a fight I picked. We used to fight bumblebees because it was good sport. We'd generally get stung and it hurt a lot and we'd swell up pretty big. I was one of those kind of fellows. If I got hit by a bumblebee or a honeybee, I swelled up tighter than Dick's hat band. One time, my brother and I found a bumblebee nest out right by the smoke, well, between the smokehouse and the what we called the milk house, where we cooled the milk down. Used water from the well to keep the milk cool. Didn't have a refrigerator. Set the cans in there, but found the bumblebee nest. Of course, us being boys, we're looking for a fight. See, boys are looking for a fight. They don't want to get hurt, but they something about them. That's the hormones or something. So we went and got us a couple of boards, old boards we found laying around, like paddles, and we had them one in each hand. And then one of us, we were about see, how old was I then? I was shucks, I was 12, 13 years old. One of the two, I don't remember which, but I know it was one of those two. And one of us then whacked the bumblebee nest, and here they come. You ever see a man fighting bumblebees? It's quite a sight to watch because you can't. You got both hands going as fast as they can go if you got something in them. Because those bumblebees are they're darting and you don't know where they are. And there's more of them around. I mean, you feel like a man in a fighter jet with bogeys all around you, as they say. You don't know which one to go at first. Well, that's the way to the bumblebees, only worse. And generally, one of them is going to get to your head, your face, your neck, something, and they're going to lay it on you big time. Well, and that when they do it, it's a funny thing about a bumblebee, you don't even know he's on you until he hits you. And as soon as he hits you, he's stabbing you with that tail, with that stinger right now, as soon as he hits. And as soon as he gets that stabbing done, just wham, he's gone. And you try to, one landed right there. I felt it hit. I knew I was going to get it. I got it. Of course, I tried to brush him away. It's too late. I wanted to go to town that night in the worst way. In the worst way. Because they were having the snake dance that night. The snake dance. And in that little town where I went to high school, and I just started in, getting out of the grades, going to school there, the snake dance was the biggest thing going every year. And it was coupled up with what we called the homecoming football game. Homecoming. That was a big game where everybody came home. All the people, all the old folk from all around. But before the game, just before dusk, we had the snake dance. And what we did was trying to hype things up for the game, I reckon. It was a pretty big deal. The name of the team, the football team, was the Warriors. The Warriors. And so every year we elected a warrior to do the war dance before the football game. It was generally a girl, and Marjorie Eisnoggle was the warrior that year. She was the warrior every year I was in school, I think. And she dressed up in buckskin and had a long headdress on. And while the band was playing the war dance song, it was one of those famous Indian songs, da 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 da. She'd come out, she'd run out into the middle of the football field and do the war dance, and she was good at that war dance. I don't know how she learned how to do it. It was kind of like a rain dance, but of course the crowd would be going crazy. It wasn't that big a crowd, but it was big for us. The crowd would be going crazy. But before she did that, that was just before the game, Marjorie would lead the snake dance. And what she would do, she'd be the head of the snake dance, and she would grab the hand of the person behind her, and people would grab each other's hands by the hundreds, usually younger people, because it was physically strenuous. And she would go down the main street of town. There was only one main street. and then some side streets and come around and come back to the football field at the edge of town at the high school. And as she was going down the main street, she just leading back and forth like this, like a snake. So the whole group was hundreds of people start doing that, and us boys would do everything we could to get on the very end of the snake, because on the very end, don't ask me how this works. It had to do with kinetic force, I reckon. But the fellows on the very end would get whiplash, something fierce, and thrown up against cars along the street and maple trees, and that's where we wanted to be to see if we could survive, I suppose. Boy, did we have fun. I saw guys take it really hard, about got their teeth knocked out. If you were on the end, you see, because you took the brunt of all that energy. There was nothing on the end. It's like when you snap a whip, that bull whip, when it snaps, or that buggy whip. I used to see men do that. The reason it makes that loud noise is because it, on the very end, breaks the speed of sound, and it's the noise of breaking the sound barrier. You have to do it hard enough to make it reach that speed of about 750 miles an hour at the very end for a split second. The end of a bullwhip that snaps reaches that speed. You say, how do you do all this stuff, Brent? Because I grew up with a brother that was 18 months older than me, and he was kind of a nerd on that kind of stuff. He'd read that kind of stuff nonstop. He was a scientific nerd. He became an engineer. Oh, he's still interested in stuff like that. Pretty smart guy. He has a natural interest. Well, I hanging around with him. He never stopped talking. I was getting a constant lecture 24/7 during there. I learned a lot of science. It wasn't my fault. Of course, the sound barrier was a big deal because Chuck Yeager had busted the sound barrier. You remember Chuck, General Yeager. And General Chuck Yeager, I can't resist throwing this in. The man that broke the sound barrier, the hero to my brother and I, one of them when I was growing up, among John Wayne and other folk like that, was Chuck Yeager. And Chuck Yeager, decades later, became my client, the most famous client I ever had. Long story about that. He finally won his case. He had several cases going at that time. It wasn't all pleasant, but I was privileged to get to know him a little bit. You know what he told me? He told me, my daughters worked for him for a time when they were teenagers, trying to organize all of his memorabilia. He told me that went out to meet him one time at a coffee shop, and he got his wallet out and paid one of my daughters. But he told me that when he broke the sound barrier, he was out there at Edwards Air Force Base, you know. He was a test pilot. And he was a flying sergeant during World War II. He was an ace, shot down 5 planes in one day, and he shot down the Germans' first jet aircraft. He shot one of those down. Well, he told me that when he received the Medal of Honor, or the Medal of Honor, not the Medal of Honor, some famous medal that President Harry Truman pinned on him for breaking the sound barrier, they invited Chuck. He was a pretty young man. Then they invited, I called him General. I didn't call him Chuck. Then they invited his mom and dad. And General Chuck Yeager's mother and father were Republicans. And his father was an oil and gas. He ran an oil and gas drilling rig, like a wildcatter rig. That's what he did for a living. He was a hardcore Republican, according to General Yeager. Grew up there in West Virginia. He told me that his father went to that ceremony in the Oval Office, just a independent oil driller, wasn't wealthy, but there in the hills of West Virginia. And he went to that presentation of his son getting this big time medal for one expressed reason. He wanted to snub a Democrat, namely Harry Truman. And when this true story, according to General Yeager, when the Ceremony was over. Of course, President Truman went and shaking everybody's hand, and he came to Chuck Yeager's father, and he stuck his hand out, and Chuck Yeager just stared at him and didn't twitch a muscle. Well, that was embarrassing to President Truman, so he wisely just, oh, okay, and he went to the next guy. It would be to God we had more people in America that had that attitude when it came to convictions. Now, I don't know that that was a smart thing to do to snub the President of the United States. Matter of fact, the Bible says, honor all men, and if a man's in a position like that, you probably ought to do it. But it did reveal the inner core of the man, Chuck Yeager's father. He had a conviction. Right or wrong, he had a conviction. A conviction is what you are, and it cannot change. It won't change because it can't. He didn't like the policies of that communist president we had named Roosevelt. And he identified everything Roosevelt was and all the damage that Roosevelt did to the country and all the war that came and the killing and the death. He attached that to Roosevelt, and he deserved a lot of it. But then he attached it to his vice president, who became president, Harry S. Truman. Harry S., as in Sierra Truman. Well, Harry wasn't, matter of fact, Roosevelt wouldn't spit on Harry Truman. He looked down on him that much. He didn't want him to be his vice president. He thought he was a dodo. He wasn't part of the upper crust of the East Coast liberals and the old money and all that hogwash. He hated him. Oh, yeah, he was not his choice. The only reason he chose him for vice president, the party forced him into it. He knew politically he needed to do it. He was upper crust, blue blood, ultra wealthy, old Dutch money, all that stuff. Harry Truman had spent his life, as he said, staring at the south end of a northbound mule while he plowed. And he wasn't even plowing land that belonged to his family. He married into it, and he's plowing land that belonged to his wife Bess's family. Somebody asked him, he said, the guy had never been to college. He said, how is it you knew how to do all the stuff you did and understood all you stood about world affairs? He said, well, two reasons. Number one, by the time I was out of high school, I'd read every book in the library at Independence, Missouri. Number two, after I'd read all those books, I spent hundreds of hours staring at the north end of a southbound mule while I plowed ground. And when you do that, he said, you got nothing to do but think things over a lot and figure a lot of stuff out. And if you don't have time to do that, my friend, somehow relax, shut the TV off, study. I'm quoting the Bible. Study to be quiet. If you don't do that, you're a dodo and you'll remain a dodo. All the things you've taken in life, in your head in life, through those 7 holes in your head, your eyes, your ears, your nose, and all the experiences you've had, if you don't take time to try to put it together, put some of that stuff together, you're as worthless, as they say here at home, as worthless as tits on a boar hog. Let's don't be that way. Double jeopardy. It's against the law. They tried me, the jury sprung me. The law says they can't try me again for the same operative facts, the same offense. It's against our law to be put in jeopardy twice for life and limb and property. That's all you got in this life is life, liberty, and property, life and limb, liberty and property. Are my life, liberty, and property guarded by the Constitution? Now, I would have said that different. I would have asked that question different. I wouldn't have said, are my life, liberty, and property guarded by the Constitution? I would have said, does the Constitution guard my life, liberty, and property? You see the difference? One's in the passive and the other one's in the active. I try to put things in the active. It's more alive, it's more active. But be that as it may, Does our Constitution guard all that we have in this life, liberty, and property, so that no man is allowed to touch either of them or any of them? According to the law of the law of the land. That's our common law. That phrase means our common law. When our Constitution of the United States says law of the land, it does not mean the outcome standards. Oh, I know, I've repeated this 10,000 times, but I'll say it again, it bears repeating. Our common law is not outcome standards. Do not covet, lie, steal, commit adultery, murder. That's not our common law. That's the statutes of God. Those are outcome standards. Our common law is the way, the method, the process, the course of process, due process, the law of the land, we call it. Our common law, we call it. How, not what. How we are to go about government. How our courts are to operate. How we are to live our lives. Our common law is not a list of laws of do's and don'ts. It is not. And neither is our Bible primarily that either, although those things are included. Our Bible comprises those things, yes, but it's more about process. And what is process? Getting right down to the ground. Let's quit being technical. What is process? Let's start with this. If you can do this, our common law will open up to you if you can do this, if God's put it in you to do it. One thing, just one thing, if you can do it. What is it? I know this may sound a little bit funny, a little bit odd, but this is my conclusion, having studied the Bible intensely, translated it intensely for well over 45 years now, having tried to see life through the laws of nature, our common law tradition, and the laws of nature is God because I have it on my mind constantly. This is my testimony and conclusion. If you can do one thing, what is it? Honor thy father. Honor thy father. Well, what about my mother? If you honor your father, according to the grammar of that command in the Bible, the Hebrew grammar, if you honor your father, you are honoring your mother. And if you honor your father individually, you will also honor her individually. You will. And not only that, it will start to expand. You've learned the lesson of that, then you'll realize who God is. That's the way all children start. They ought to start. And if you can honor your father, watch that. Oh, I know a lot of people try to honor their mother and ignore their father. That never works. No, you can't leave. It doesn't say father or mother, or it's not disjunctive conjunction. It is conjunctive and consecutive. The conjunction in the Hebrew text is not only conjunctive, inclusive, but it is consecutive. In other words, the second action follows from the first. As a result, it'll happen. And if you can do that, you can honor the men God wants you to honor. Well, yeah, how does that have anything to do with due process? I'll tell you. If you can't do it with your own father, it ain't going to happen in any court, and it ain't going to happen in government, because that's the foundation of all government, is honoring father. Ladies, have you had children with a man? Honor their father. Honor your father, ladies. And your children will do the same thing. And when they do it to your husband, they will do it to you. They'll honor you. Oh, have I seen that? And what I see mostly is it doesn't happen. And I see why. But the Bible, that's the practicality of Christianity. You say, is that due process? Yes, because that's how you approach life, not the end result you're trying to reach, just how you do it. If you approach your father with respect, your father will be better disposed toward you according to God, whether you know it or not, whether you think he is or not, whether he acts like it or not. And it will expand. When I go into court, I show respect to the position of the court. Why? You go in there give the judge a good cussing, do you think he's going to listen to anything I ask him to do? I've gone into court before, be sitting there, all lawyers making their arguments, and the judge knows who I am. I live in a small world back in the Wabash Valley, and the judge gets all done, and I'll be sitting there just acting like I'm not involved, and he'll go, Mr. Winters? Oh, yes, Judge. Is there anything that I can help you with? Is there anything, I've had him say that, I can do for you while you're here? No, Judge, not today. Thank you, Judge. Honor all men, including start with your father, start with your mother. Again, and I don't care what the response to you is, do it anyway. God says he'll bless you through them if you do. And you'll be able to do it to lesser men. And anybody other than your father, I don't care if it's the president of the United States, as much as we are to honor these positions, the president doesn't amount to pinch of nothing compared to your own father. Not to God, it doesn't. That's God's command. First, honor thy father. That's due process. That's the way. How do you approach your father? You approach your father with your hat in your hand. You can't do that? You hate your father? You don't have any respect for anybody. You can't. You won't. It ain't going to happen until you get that straight. My father's dead, and he died in a flop house because he was a drunk. Yeah. Does that lessen the command? Are there any provisos with it? No, there aren't. Doesn't say honor your father if he's a good guy. Honor your father if he honors you. Honor your father if he treats you right. No, no, no. When God gives a command, that's it. Okay, we're on the last page, Miss Francine. Question. Yeah, that's the last. Oh, next to the last, page 74. But if my property is wanted for a useful public object, may it not be taken from me? Answer, yes. Answer, yes, if it's wanted for a useful public purpose, it can be taken. That's called eminent domain. They want to run a road through the corner of your 40-acre field. They want to widen the street, and your house is right on the main street. I saw this happen in that little town where I grew up. They wanted to widen that main street running north and south. I knew, the Connollys. I knew the Connollys well. Connollys, and not Connolly, Conley, Conley. And they had to cut into their property where their house sat about yay far. Eminent domain. They paid them for it. Eminent domain is called eminent. It's a dominion that the government has if it's for a public purpose. But our Constitution of the United States says they can't just take it. They got to give you fair market value for it. I remember reading about, this is a common law doctrine. It's in England too, see. That's common law country. Buffalo Bill. You remember hearing about Buffalo Bill? Growing up, I knew who Buffalo Bill was. That was Bill Cody. Bill Cody, he was from he's from back in my neck of the woods, but he went out west when he was young. Like Wild Bill. Wild Bill Cody and Buffalo Bill, as far as I know, no relatives, but they grew up pretty close to one another. But they went out west when they were teenagers. A couple of wild men. And they knew each other, by the way. Matter of fact, Buffalo Bill, he had what made him really famous. He was a scout for the Army. Then he was a professional buffalo hunter and other critters like that. And he'd shoot them and bring them into the U.S. Army. He traveled with them. But what really made him famous was he was a scout for the U.S. Army. And this guy was an egomaniac. Bill Cody was an egomaniac. Buffalo Bill Cody was an egomaniac. He got the nickname Buffalo Bill because he was shooting buffaloes all the time and providing meat for the railroad workers and the U.S. Army and all that. When I say egomaniac, I think it'd be hard to fathom how much of an egomaniac that guy was. He wore a fancy set of custom-made buckskins with all of the frills and the fancy stuff all over him. And he wore a great big hat, about yay big, with a brim sticking out, and he cocked it on his head. And when he was serving as a scout, and then he had that long yeller hair, and he had, the goatee with a, what do they call that? That grow right there. And he was a showman. And there was a chief by the name of Yellerhand. And during his time with the U.S. Army, old Buffalo Bill Cody saw Yellerhand from a distance. They were getting ready to maybe square off for a fight. I mean, the Army, and Yellerhand was a chief. I forget why they called him Yellerhand, but those Indians, they had names like that. By the way, I ran into a fellow the other day at working to work in the Walmart, and he was a Navajo. And I said, "Where are you from down there? The reservation?" He told me exactly where he's from. He was from the Four Corners area, if you know where that is. That's where the four states come together, and you can actually put one hand in one state, one hand in another state, put one foot in another state, and another foot in another state at the same time. And the four states come together in Four Corners, and the name of the place is Four Corners. I've been there a lot. Well, he was from right there. He was Navajo. And I won't say his name because I don't want you to look him up. There can't be many Navajos with this name because it's not a Navajo name. It's a Dutch name. But a lot of Indians in America, I'm talking about tribal red men, have Dutch names. And the reason for that is when they started the Indian schools and they tried to educate the Indians, and they had them in Oklahoma and up in Dakotas and different places. There are a lot of Dutch missionaries. Dutch Christian missionaries worked in these schools, and a lot of these folk would have a first name, these Indians back 100, 125 years ago, but they wouldn't have a last name, and these Dutch missionaries would give them their last names. And this, no, I won't even say part of it, but it's a fascinating name in American folklore. A Dutch name, very well known because of American folklore. If that gives you any hint. But I asked him, a friendly fellow. I said, "Did you grow up in one of those 8-sided hogans?" He said, "Yeah, I did. I lived in a hogan, grew up in a hogan." 8 sides. You've seen them if you've driven across the reservation. I said, "I'm going to ask you a few questions." Oh, he was real friendly. "Have you ever smoked peyote?" "Oh, yeah." He said, "I tried it, but I don't smoke it anymore. I quit it. But I know what it's like." And he enjoyed answering my questions. I said, "Is it all right if I call you an Injun?" And he said, "It's all right with me." I said, "Do you demand that people call you a Native American?" He said, "Oh, no, absolutely not." He said to me what that fellow up in Oregon said, that Indian up there. He said, "Them's white man words, Native American." I said, "Well, I figured it was the case." He said, "Yeah." He said, we're just Indians, and we want to be Indians, so you can call me an Indian if you want." I said, "Well, I refer to you that way. Of course, I learned his first name." Oh, yeah. Politically correct speech is just hogwash, friends. Don't get caught up in it. It's just white man stuff trying to foist things upon people to get money out of them. That's all what it's geared to, and the devil's very clever at it, making us use words like that. Well, eminent domain. The government can take property for public use. The question has come up in our courts: is a sports stadium public use? Is a sports stadium public use? Can the government, can a private corporation take your property under the eminent domain doctrine to build a sports stadium for private property? Some of our courts have said yes to that, and people have had their private property taken, defining a sports stadium as public use. Is it? What about a mall, a shopping mall? That's private stuff where people Private people make a lot of money. Do they have the right to take your private property for a shopping mall? Well, some of the courts have said, well, that's a public use, so yes. Is that what our common law intends now or then when our Constitution was put in place? I answer affirmatively, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Hmm. Sports arena, absolutely not. That's nothing but entertainment. Put a lot of beef on the hoof out there, like football players, beef on the hoof. They're professional entertainers. Each one of them makes millions of dollars a year. The owners of the team make even more. It's non productive. It sucks money out of our economy and produces absolutely nothing. People go to the games, drink beer, get excited, go home. What do they got to show for it? Nothing. Now, do I like to watch football? Oh, yeah. I'll tell you, I'd rather watch high school football than professional football or college football. It's more fun to watch. Watching those young boys out there, because they make more mistakes. They're not perfect. That's what's fun to watch. I mean, sometimes when they get hit, they hit hard and they do things that, well, they're not supposed to do because they haven't learned yet. And it's fun to watch boys play. But to make the hype out of it, we are absolutely overwhelmed with the stupidity of being interested in sports. It is destroying our culture. It's contributing to it. It always has. It's emptiness, friends. It doesn't produce anything. It doesn't create anything. It is pure escapism. That's all it is. Pure and simple. Is escapism profitable in some ways? Oh, sometimes a guy needs to kick back and relax and put his brain in neutral. I know you ladies can't do that. I understand that, but it's relaxing to put your brain in neutral. But is that good? Is it good? But used to be Norman Lear and those fellows that were left wing wacko Jewish people. They think up some sitcom television station. I've heard them say, "Oh well, I designed this show so Joe Sixpack could come and sit and veg out with a 6-pack of beer after a hard day's work." And of course, they make absolute fortunes off of what? People. People who can't afford to contribute to the fortunes of the people that run the professional football team, the baseball teams, and all that. To get excited, do I care? As much as I used to like Larry Bird play basketball. Well, of course I did. That was part of the culture back in my neck. In the Wabash Valley, basketball was a pretty big deal. High school stuff like that was. My father, it's not really always good. My father told me when they came around with Little League, you've heard me tell this story, some of you, Little League was new. And they came around when I was in the grades, I believe I was in the second grade, and said, "Hey, you can play baseball now. We're starting these Little League teams, and take this card home and get your mom and dad to sign it. We'll get you signed up and we'll have Little League." And I brought my card home. I was all excited because I always brought my baseball glove, even in the second grade. Every boy had a baseball glove. We brought it to school. And when it came time to run out to schoolhouse and we'd play baseball, we didn't have any home plate. We just had mud holes in the ground for home plate, first base, second. But we played baseball. We were overwhelmed with baseball even at that age. I came home, told my mom and dad. Dad said, "No, you're not playing Little League." Oh, I was almost in tears. All my friends were playing Little League. We played baseball at school. Now they were organizing it. Dad said, "You're not playing that." I said, "Why not?" I know. I've said this story before, and people come back and chat and talk about how much they learned in Little League and how much it was good for their children, and on they go. Well, I'm not saying in every case. Maybe God will use all sorts of evil things and things that aren't biblical to teach people things. Me too. I've learned a lot. But Dad always said, now, this is the world I grew up in, the culture I grew up in. And the people that organized Little League when I was growing up were not of my father's culture. They were urbanized. And they thought it was important that their boys learn how to play baseball. Dad told me, said, no, I'm not going to, you're not going. Because what those men will teach you, I know those men. I know their families. I know who they are. They're going to teach you how to cheat. And you know what I found out? No kidding. I found out that was true. The stories I could tell you about the boys whose fathers were all hyped up in that stuff. And then in high school, they were always there and they were wanting their boy to be on they were donating to the sports club and money for uniforms. And they wanted their boy on, and they get their boy on the first team. And I know for a fact they learned how to cheat because I had them do it to me and it got brutal. My father said, that's not the way to live. No, that's wrong. God hates that kind of thing. The competition, anything you can do within what looks legal, that's what they told them to do. I had friends, they'd tell me what their fathers were telling them to do in Little League and in high school sports. Dad didn't want me to participate in any of it, and I didn't participate in that. And after all these years and all my experience in my world where I'm from, I found out that was absolutely true. And then my dad said this, you bring any of those men out here at my house, that are pushing their boys in sports the way they're doing, and we'll have a contest and see who can run the furthest, run the fastest, jump the highest, do more push ups. We'll see. Bring them out here and we'll have a contest. And the truth was, I watched Dad. Yeah, Dad could outdo all of them. He was athletic. Everything he did, he was always jumping and running. He'd come to the fence, he'd grab the fence post, and he would vault the fence. Of course, he got older. He's almost 100 now. He's not doing that anymore. I have never known a more physical man in my life, a more athletic man than my father. And he never had an opportunity to ever play sports. He never went to high school. He couldn't get to town. Sports are not that important. And they have overwhelmed us, no question. And they have distracted us from what's most important. Well, private property is not to be taken for private profit. And that's what sports arenas have done all over the country. Our Constitution of the United States forbids it because our common law forbids it. It's a common law doctrine. Common law doctrine. Our whole Constitution, our common law principles of how common law, are what we call the law of the land, the how government is supposed to work, the limits it's supposed to have, how that works. Well, I'm just speaking from my own experiences. I'm not trying to make you take my point of view about sports, but I know what my point of view is. Tom Jefferson said this: do not teach your children to play games with balls. Dad used to say to me, what good does it you do to chase a ball around a pasture field? Football is chasing a ball around the pasture field. Golf, GOLF, is chasing a goofy little ball around a pasture field. That's what it is. What profit is there in that? He would ask me that question rhetorically. What profit is there? Well, it helps men relax. Some of the best business deals in the world are made on the golf course. I know. I've heard it all. I've been around it all. Like, I don't know. No, I know. I did play sports against my father's wishes in high school. I was on the track team and I played basketball and football. He didn't want it. And he said, if you can't get home after school and do the feeding, that means I had to bust up the corn ears for the cattle. We had to throw corn to the hogs, had to feed the chickens, had to rotate the boar hogs, and any other little thing we had to do, run corn through the hammer mill, scoop it through at the hammer mill, all that stuff. He said, if you can't get home and do that after school, You ain't going to be on the team. I ran home. It's just something I wanted to do. Dad said, well, if you can get home, do the feeding. So I went to the track coach because that meant I couldn't go to track practice. But you couldn't go to track practice after school. You couldn't be on the team. And I said to the coach, Coach Brett, I said he was been a basketball player down at the University of Evansville, Indiana. Great big fellow, 6'5" or something, redheaded. Steve Britt. Steve Britt. I'm pretty sure he was related to the guy that founded Britt Airlines in Indianapolis, but I never made the connection. I liked him. Well, Steve, I said, Coach Britt? He said, yeah. We only had 5 guys on the track team, just 5. Each one of us did everything, many events as was allowed. And I said, I can't go to track practice. I want to be on the team. If I run home from school instead of going to track practice, I won't ride the school bus. It was an hour ride home. I'll run home, depending on which way I went, between 8 and 10 miles in there. He said, you want to run home? I said, yeah. Then I will get my conditioning in. He said, okay. You run home after school. I told him my dad wouldn't let me come to track practice because I had to do the feeding when I got home. The chores, as we call it, the feeding. And I liked old Britt. He said, well, sure. I don't have any trouble with that. You want to do that? Do it. And I did. Worked out okay, but Dad didn't approve of me being on the team necessarily. And you say, maybe your dad went too far. Maybe he did, but he made a point. Hyperbole makes a point. And I've never forgotten it. There are things important in life. Tom Jefferson said, don't teach your children to play games with balls. No. And back then, they didn't have baseball, they didn't have basketball, they didn't have football, but they had plenty of games you play with balls. He said, don't do that. Instead, teach your sons to carry and shoot a gun. That's what he said. I've got the quote in my book on the militia. Because that is useful. That is the fundamental duty of a young man. A militiaman is to be ever ready with a weapon. It increases your usefulness and it increases your confidence to know how to use a weapon. It is the mark, said Tom Jefferson, of a gentleman. Gentle man. You say, a gun is the mark of a man being gentle? Yes. My brother wrote an article, my older brother, the one I was telling you about, wrote an article when he went to the Naval Academy and he served his years out. And he wrote an article for the Armed Forces Officers magazine describing, plumbing the depths of what a gentleman is. His conclusion, I quoted in my Bible in a couple of places. I can't quote it all, but his conclusion was this. A gentleman, fundamentally, watch me, a gentleman is a man. Whoa, that's stop right there. A man? Yeah, not a woman. See, we got to make sure we make a distinction here. We forget that. A gentleman is a man that knows how, that has trained himself how to use violence lawfully and effectively, but only does so when law demands. Let me repeat that definition. What is a gentleman at common law? A gentleman at common law, this came from our father. He just tried to expand on it and understand it. A gentleman at common law is a man who has taught himself how to effectively use violence, but never does so, only does so where the law demands.
Well, this is Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com, coming to you, coming at you from the remote hinterlands of the Wabash of the River Valley, where the hogs, the frogs, and the dogs keep up a racket all night long,